I am really delighted to see the folks who've come back. It's just wonderful to see great faces again. People who were here to do our first in-person demo. And I'm delighted by our demonstrator. We've had, as you know, Zoom meetings with artists from literally all over the country and some from England. So lots of really good painters. But not all of them are our own. She's a member of NFWS and has been for a while, has helped us out. And she is, if you can see the collection of paintings that she's put on the tables over there, an astounding artist, astounding artist. But you know, I really would like to read, I know you all read the information that she sent in, that Sally put on the website and also the water bucket. I know you all read it, but I'm going to read it to you again because I'm really impressed with your artist statement. Forgive me. She says she loves the transparency and luminosity of watercolor. I think we all do. It's something that is unique to only watercolor. Every subject presents new challenges and pushes me to try new techniques and different methods. Many years of experimentation, I know this resonates with me and I'm sure with most of you, have taught me to use quality materials and to plan ahead in my painting, as watercolors are less forgiving than other mediums. Every success is a real triumph though, and I love to share what I've learned with other painters. Light is a crucial element in almost everything I paint. You'll see, and you'll see. I always strive to have interesting lighting in my work and try to create it, although the application of subtle glaze, through the application of subtle glazes and deep, rich shadows. I think we all have experimented at different times, and we all, with different degrees of success. You know, I do paintings sometimes and I look at them and I say, oh, you could have done a lot better than that. And it didn't work out. So I know it's just common in all artists. This lady may have that in her heart, but the work that comes out that she shows us, the good stuff, is just superb. So tonight, Shelley Pryor is going to tell us about how she does it, how she makes the magic that she makes. Shelley, make magic.
Thank you very much. And I'm really happy to be here. I rarely get to come out to any of the meetings because I'm usually teaching Thursday evenings, and I actually teach a lot of classes in the week. I teach about 7 or 8 classes per week. So it's a lot, and this is sort of my second thing today. But I love teaching. I think I like teaching almost as much as I like painting. But anyway, what I have for you tonight is I thought you probably would not have had a demonstration on this before, but I want to talk about creating the look of iridescence without any metallics or special mediums or anything like that, just our usual paints. I chose this particular subject because it was particularly iridescent, but it wasn't a great photograph. I just happened to be in an antique store and I saw this little thing and I asked what the price was and they told me, and I took a big gulp and I told her what I wanted it for. So she said, oh, you can take a picture of it. But of course in an antique store there's no good place to take a picture of something. You've got terrible lighting and everything else. So I have the original photo. This is the original photo with lots of distracting stuff in the background. I hope you can see that. And, but here's the dilemma. If I edit out the background, I also have to edit out the clear parts of the glass, right? That has to change as well. So I tried a few different, I tried taking that out, and then I tried a few different backgrounds to see what sort of lighting or what sort of setting would I like to put this in. I know the 2-hour demo goes pretty quickly, so we'll see how the time goes. Hopefully I can get to a background. That would be kind of fun to do. But if I were putting in a background, this is just the photo with the background removed and replaced with some colors. So I can see how it looks against white, how it looks against something really dark, or something in a warm family or a cool family. And it just gives me some ideas of what might look good. I almost always work from my own photographs. I find that I know the subject a little better when I do that, and then I feel like I don't have to edit as much, because I take the photograph, I'm already composing with my camera or my phone or whatever it is I have. So I'm already composing, or if I'm doing a still life, I'm setting it up. So I don't usually have to do too much Photoshop, but in this case, I kind of needed to. And I loved this little perfume bottle, but you know, I didn't have $300 to spend on it for a painting prop. So just for speed's sake, what I did was I taped it, I put graphite paper underneath, and I transferred this design. It's probably going to be too light for you to see on the screen, but I'll get some color on here pretty quickly and you'll see what I mean. But I want to take a look at the different types of glass that we have in here. It is all glass, but it's got different finishes on it. So we have the transparency of the top, right? We can see right through that. In the original, you could see all that woodwork and stuff in the background. So I kind of took some of that out. Then we have this iridescent area here, and it's not very shiny. It's kind of pearly, right? It's got that pearly finish. Then we have this design right here, and that is shiny. It's very, very shiny and reflective. So it's picking up all kinds of colors in it. So we have to treat all of these things a little bit differently. When I transferred, and that sometimes will affect what you transfer or what you're drawing if you're going to be drawing. Because if I were to take and you know, outline all of these that have these soft edges, of course all those pencil lines are just going to show right through. I mainly use transparent watercolor. I don't have any cadmiums on my palette or anything like that. I'm using mostly transparent colors. I feel that the transparent colors allow the most light to pass through the paint and come back. I liken transparent watercolor to like a piece of acetate. You can stick that in a window, and beside that you can put an opaque piece of construction paper that's also the same color, and it's night and day. Like, quite literally, night and day, because one blocks the light and one lets it through. So I like to let the light through all my paint, so I am very conscious of using transparent color whenever possible. So that's my sort of analogy about transparent versus opaque. It allows me to glaze. Yes?
I wanted to say that if you have questions, this lady is very comfortable in her own skin. She's very good about answering questions, and as she says, she teaches a lot of classes, old and young, and people ask all kinds of questions. So you are encouraged to ask questions. She's very comfortable.
Yeah, just shout it out. That's great. All right, so I'm going to choose an area that I want to work in. And I'll start maybe with this top area, and then I'll work my way down. And I have to ask myself a couple of questions. If this is dark, can it go over top of this pearly area? Can it go over top? Or does it need to be isolated so that these colors aren't affected by these ones? This is the thing you have to consider when you are working with transparent color, because you're not covering up everything underneath. It's going to affect the colors. And I'm probably telling a lot of you things that you already know about transparency, but it never hurts to underscore that in case you are newer to watercolor. So with that in mind, let's start with this top piece. And I'm going to mix some color. First, let me tell you, I'm working on Arch's 140-pound cold press paper. I am using mostly Da Vinci watercolor.
Is that what you mostly use as Arch's?
I use it almost exclusively. And not because that's the best paper in the world, but because it's the one I've become most familiar with.
I think there's a relationship between you and your paper. You get to know it. You get to know all its idiosyncrasies and everything else. If you've switched papers constantly, you'll find, and I know a lot of you will agree with this, you switch papers, you have to change how you paint. I find that anyway, because this is acting different, when I put a wash down or something. So it's acting differently. This, I am so familiar with it at this point that I can predict what it's going to do. It's like an old friend. So I'm using also Da Vinci watercolors for the most part. I have some Winsor Newtons and I think some core watercolors in here as well. But most of mine are Da Vinci. Again, it's not because Da Vinci's the best in the world. It was an affordable paint of artist quality that my students could use. I didn't want to use something different than they were using, so that's what I'm using. And I actually like the paint. It's very, very rich. You can see I have pretty rich colors in my examples over there. And let's take a minute and just I'm going to dampen this because I see that, is this on screen? It is on screen. So I'll slide that over a little bit. And so I want to get this sort of amber color in here. And I know that this dark can go over top. There's a spot at the top that doesn't have that color, so I'm going to have to avoid that section. But I know that I can work through this. I have seen some painters and they will paint it like puzzle pieces. And it usually ends up looking like a painting that was done like puzzle pieces with little dark lines all in between. So whenever possible, take that wash right through, but always consider what's going to come after that step. That's why you always have to think ahead in watercolor. All right, so I'm going to take an amber color, and that amber color looks a lot like a raw sienna. Now, I do realize raw sienna is not the most transparent color. I could be using Quin Gold too. That definitely is a transparent color. And a little bit of permanent rose. So permanent rose is quite lovely. Are you getting my palette on here too? You are, perfect. You are good. Okay, so if I mix the two here, I can get a nice sort of peachy color that I think is similar to this. I can always test it. I'll test it on this little sheet of paper here. And it's pretty close. I'm also testing for the value as I do this. So I matched up my color, but I also have to know how thin to make it, or how thick to make it, or how much water I need to add or not add. And I'm going to come through here. Now, you'll notice I haven't done any masking. I very often do use masking in my glass paintings, but I thought that might bog us down tonight, so I'm just going to go right through here and work around some of those lights. I think you're probably all at least a little familiar with masking methods. If not, I'm happy to show you some of that. I did bring my masking stuff here. And one thing I want to say about adding in a wash over dry paper. And this is something, I've watched a lot of YouTube videos, and nobody ever talks about this. But when you are putting wet paint on dry paper, are you making it wet enough? You might not be, because what happens is if you put the paint on and it's really wet, but then you spread it out, it's no longer sitting on top, it's sinking right in, because you've put a thin skim on it, and that's going to go straight into that very thirsty paper. If I put the paint on, and I always paint like I'm painting with a feather, so if I put this paint on and it's sitting, look how wet that still is. Sometimes I have to wait a little longer for things to dry, but for me, in the end, it's worth it. It's worth it. I'd rather not have the brush marks. Thank you very much. I don't like those. So I can going to leave a little spot for that little bit of blue over there, because that's a completely different color. And I'll put that in there. Now there's some other areas of this peachy color in here. I think I could lighten this up first, so I'll pull a little out of this. Just lift a little of that out, so now the center is a little lighter. Still got a little color, which is nice, but it's not back to white paper. So I'm going to use some of these colors over here in this rim as well, but there's some new colors in here. There's a yellow, a little bit of darker color perhaps, and that's what I'm looking for. And of course there's this big white flare of light, and I say a flare of light because it's not like a crisp line, so I wouldn't mask that. If I masked that, I'd have this really, really crisp edge, as you know. Everybody here who knows that masking fluid does that. So I'm just going to put some clean water in that spot. Clean water here, not really, really wet, because I don't want it to completely close in when I put that wet color around it. Just damp. And then I can start adding in these colors. Now I know that I can come back to this multiple times. That's one thing I know. I'll try to not do that so that we can just keep going tonight. But I just need to keep an eye, what do I have to not paint so in order to keep those highlights? It's a little sliver there, so I'm leaving that little sliver. I'll do this whole rim here. Okay, grab some more color. I don't want to spread it out too far or it's going to dry before I get it all placed where I want it. So let's go into here. There's a little bit of yellow, so I'm going to put maybe some, I'll use some gamboge. Gamboge is a nice bright yellow. Maybe even a little bit more red next to that.
Shelley, are you particular about your brushes?
I'm fairly particular about them, but not overly. I happen to like the natural hair brushes. These are squirrel hair brushes. These brushes I'm using are actually travel brushes. And that just happens to be coincidental. I bought them because they were a good price. And I've tried several different brands, and most of the squirrel hair brushes I really like.
What brand is that?
This one's one called Bia Elk, B-I-A-E-L-K. I don't know how else to pronounce that. I'm probably massacring the pronunciation, but I don't know. Now, if I want to put some red in here, but I want to keep it in the spot where I'm painting it, I might wait for the shine to die a little bit, but I better make sure this brush is drier, because this brush will hold a lot. Sometimes if I'm adding into a wet wash, I'll even switch to my synthetic brush, because I know that synthetic brush won't hold as much. But I can blot this, take most of the moisture out of this, and this one will be fine too. So,
And you find it easier to find natural hair in Canada than here in New York. There are some places.
well, it's imported.
Yeah.
It's online.
Rosemary won't send us natural hair brushes in New York State.
Yeah, there are a lot of regulations. But I will say that the brush companies are really stepping up to the plate, and they are producing brushes that are more and more and more like the natural hair brushes. I've had a number of people encourage me to get away from the natural hair brushes and go into the synthetic hair brushes. And I have been using some of those, which I do like. I just don't like them quite as much. They don't hold quite as much paint and water. So and I have these already, so I continue to use these. And the one thing I found about watercolor brushes is if you treat them very gently, which you should, if you treat them gently, they will last you forever. I still have my Kolinsky brushes from college.
How do you clean them?
Water. I just,
No soap?
no soap. Soap is drying to, that's drying to your skin, it's drying to your own hair, and it will do the same for your brushes. So, yeah, I just use water. And I make sure that I kind of open up the bristles and brush it along the bottom of my container or something like that so that the bristles splay and that paint gets rinsed out. Okay, so that's a little bit hot and a little bit bright. I can pull off a little bit of that. So with a damp brush, look how my brush bends. So you know it's not a wet brush when it does that.
And I personally noticed that's the difference between the synthetics and the natural. The natural stays how you left it.
Yeah,
The synthetics snap back into shape.
right.
So you prefer, you're used to the naturals staying bent if that's how you last used it. You don't mind that it doesn't snap back into shape?
I don't. It used to drive me crazy that the bristles didn't snap back to a nice point.
Right.
But it all depends on what you're doing.
Okay.
So right now I'm applying paint like a wash. So if I'm applying paint like a wash, I don't need it to snap back. I'm only making contact with the paper and the paint is falling off of my brush. As I said, I'm using a feather touch. So I'm going to carry some of this down into this neck area. I don't know if I'm doing this extra dark. The lighting's very different here than in my usual studio. Churches aren't typically known for their great lighting. All right, so all of this has a little color. So you notice I'm looking back and forth. That's maybe something you can't see in the mirror, but I'm looking back and forth all the time, checking as I'm painting. Because I always figure I've got one go at this, right? I've got one kick at the can to get this right. I shouldn't say that. You can actually lift some color out, and there are things you can do. But I'd rather not. I'd rather not have to redo anything, so that I look frequently. All right, so I've got from the neck up here. This part will be getting fairly dry. I actually did bring a dryer. I don't know, can we plug it in with the extension cord? Oh, well, there's a power bar right in the front of the desk. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, I
Want to
didn't
go
even see
under
it.
the table or over the table?
Doesn't matter. This is very quiet. This is actually a heat tool, so I can still talk over it. If you're not familiar, I do YouTube videos, and I found that I hated having to mute my mic every time, because then whoever's watching is listening to dead silence. This way I can keep talking. So it's very quiet. This is a heat tool.
It's not a hairdryer, it's a heat.
It's not a hairdryer. It is a heat tool. So be careful with this around masking fluid. You don't want to bake it onto your paper. But it does dry very quickly. Oh, it didn't like that, did it? No, it's, yes, no, it gets very hot. I don't even think you could tolerate it if you did that. So I'm looking now at, and I'm going to keep that mix there so I can come back to that, but I want to kind of do a little bit more on this upper part here. So I see little bits of this color here, which is a little bit of a gold color, perhaps a goldish green. I don't know what it's reflecting, but there's obviously some goldish greens within this reflection, so I'm going to use a little goldish green. So if I take my raw sienna, once again, and I add maybe just a little whisper of cobalt blue to it, or even cerulean blue would work. I get this sort of dull gold color. So I'm looking for where are those gold shapes, and that's what I'm painting in. And I'm going to leave lots of little highlight facets. And I got to tell you, the one thing about painting glass, people think it must take me hours and hours to do because I'm so meticulous and everything. And I am pretty fussy. I'm probably fussier than a lot of other painters. But the secret is that you don't have to be as accurate as you think. When you look at glass, and then it's got all these reflections and everything happening on it, and you move your head this far, it's all different. It all changes. So it's very forgiving in those terms. You can change things around, and it's okay. Sometimes you can change things around so that you can actually, like here, if I wanted to keep this background white, I'd put a little color up there so that it doesn't completely disappear. I don't have to finish every edge. But here, I could make the top of that a little more complete. So let's take something dark now. So we've got these dark bands, which have a kind of a warm tone to them. They're like a brown, and it's no doubt it's something that was reflecting in the studio. But I don't think that that's going to be a deal breaker in terms of accuracy for this. So I'm going to take a little burnt sienna, a little bit of maybe Payne's gray, which gives me a really nice warm gray. I can warm up my Payne's gray with burnt sienna.
Shelley, I had a question about those lines up there on the top. They aren't a continuation, not a continuation, but the same thing as those blue lines down below?
It could be, yes, that could be a reflection of those. That's a good observation. It could be. They are appearing black in this reference.
Yeah.
So,
I do see some blue in them too.
oh, yes, there is some blue. You're correct. I think you are correct, actually. That's a good observation, that's what it is. And you could sit and try to analyze everything, or you can just paint the shapes and colors you see, which is what I do a lot.
Is that legal?
Yeah. I've yet to find this mysterious art law book. There is no law book on art. Some people think there's laws. You can't do this and you can do that and so on and so on. But there's a lot you can do. Get away with it. All right, let's bring this across like that. And I'm going to put in some of these major shapes. I find that putting the major shapes in makes it a lot easier for me to work things out after that. Like the small shapes, like don't sweat the small stuff. That's better, thank you.
Shelley,
Yes?
could you tell us a little bit about how you came to be doing watercolor?
I'm so glad you asked. I'm going to tell you a true story. I took art after high school. I went to Sheridan College in Oakville, and I went to Dundas Valley School of Art. and I took the foundation program there. And what, you know, when you're taking a foundation program, or if you're taking an art college, the one thing that they will do is they'll tell you everything you need to know about like composition and value and color mixing and all of that sort of thing. But what they don't tell you is how to get those ideas off of your brush. So when I teach, I have to say that I teach a lot of mechanics, because for me that was the most frustrating thing. So the consequence of my attempt at watercolor was absolutely cringeworthy. It was terrible. And in fact, the instructor said to me, "I bet you'd like acrylic." So, which was a polite way of saying give up, which I did. I mean, that wasn't maybe her intent, but I didn't give up because of what she said. I gave up because I was frustrated, and I knew I couldn't get it to do what I wanted it to do. But oh, I still loved how it looked, and I just mooned over these magazines and things where there was these fantastic watercolor artists, and I could see that they were creating all these wonderful paintings with glow, and I thought, okay, look, this isn't a magic trick. Somebody's doing it. Somebody's figured it out. So I'm going to give it another go, and I did. Only this time I really put everything into it. I joined groups, I went online, I had just got my first computer. I went online and I joined groups there, and I took classes, different classes from different instructors, and all of that sort of thing. And I still sucked. But what I did get out of it is that a little thing would stick with me, a little aha moment, and that was enough to encourage me to keep going. And then I'd have another little aha moment, and my progression was pretty much flatline for 25 years, because I'm not even joking, because it was something that just I had kids, and there's life that gets in the way, and I was trying other things at the same time. I was trying acrylics and oils and pastels and all kinds of things, and I wasn't staying that focused. I know, I'm terrible. But I got asked to teach. And really, to be quite frank, I think I was teaching well before I was qualified to teach. I had no business teaching when I was. But I'll tell you, it's true what they say. If you want to learn something, teach it. Because you're passing on information, you have to find out that it's right? So you better do your homework, right? I'm using a lighter color here as I do this, just to get that two-tone look, not to forget telling you what I'm doing here. And there's some little noise going on in here. And I say noise, I'm not going to agonize over what these are. I'm going to make it a little bit pinker as well. I think this could be a little pinker in this little thing. So I'm leaving lots of little gaps, and I'm just putting in these little geometric shapes and things like that. Let's thin that color down a little bit. That's kind of like my brown and my pink mixed together. And I'll just paint in a little bit more here and there. I used cerulean blue here, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that. I was telling a story. But it really was, COVID was very good for me. I thought, what am I going to do? All my students, are just going to give up watercolor, and they're going to start painting in other mediums, or they're going to take up knitting or quilting or something like that. So I thought, I got to do something. So I got my camera out, which was a terrible camera, but I got my camera out and I started doing online Zoom things. This was the beginning of Zoom. No, actually it was Facebook when I started. But I was having a lot of issues with Facebook. And so I switched over to YouTube. Well, every time I tried to go live, it would have no sound, or it would, my frame would freeze or something. You know, it was technical issues. So I was getting frustrated with that. I mean, I was already trying to figure out the go live thing in the first place without it having issues. Other people were having issues too, and I think it was just during COVID, everything got overloaded. But nobody was prepared, right, including Facebook. So I'm adding some subtle layers here. I hope you can see some of the subtleties I'm putting in here, but I'm just sort of getting this a little bit more complete so that I can move on to this next section. And that by itself just looks like an abstract design, and it will until I actually start putting more detail in this. And I think I might switch to a smaller brush because I want to do a few little lines in here with my dark. And whenever I do a line, I'm pulling with my arm, not my wrist. It makes a much smoother line. So I rest my hand and I pull my arm rather than doing it this way. You know, you change the pressure because you've got this sweep motion when you use your wrist, whereas if you lock it in place, you can drag it, you've got even consistency, so you'll get a much more consistent line. All right, so let's start speeding things up a little bit here. I don't want to be running short on time or anything like that, so I'm just going to come in through here, go a little faster with some of these darks. And so when COVID came and I was doing these things with my students, they started, attending, and they were painting along with me, which was great. And they would send me their week. So it was almost like an online class, but they were getting it for free. And so then, when I was having the troubles with Facebook, I decided, no, it's a lot easier if you go on YouTube. And I have a YouTube account. Why don't I just do that? So I went YouTube Live instead. And then people started showing up. I thought, who are these people? Where'd they come from? I didn't know enough to make it not private, or not public, I mean. So I started getting people showing up. Well, now it has grown. People, and it's kind of like a weekly commitment now, where I'm showing up every Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock and I do a demonstration. I don't anybody here seen it? No? For free, yes, for free every Wednesday morning. If you go to my website, which is just shelleypryor.com, there's a page called Free Online Demos, and it's got a list of the 150 I've already done. So they're all free. Go enjoy. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram. And I noticed that some of this has filled in, so I'm just going to lift a little color here. That filled in a little more than I wanted, so I'm just going to lightly massage that paint, get it softened up again, and blot it. I get accompaniment. That's pretty cool. All right. So if something fills in more than you want it to, I've got a solution for that. So I'll get to it later. But for now, I'm just going to continue adding in. This is a little bit more blue here, so I'm going to go, I'll use cobalt blue. And a little cerulean blue, just to change it up, right? We have changes in color here. All right, I have to look for some of these darker sections and just basically paint those in the general shape that they appear.
Do you typically work in smaller areas at a time?
No, actually, I don't. I will usually work like an entire painting all at once. But I thought in this case I would just sort of get one completed, and so you can see the process for one thing all at one time. Because I know for some people I'm jumping all over the place, and it's kind of like, well, where is she working now? So I'm trying to sort of complete one section at a time because this is a demo. But when I'm working on my own, I'll put a medium value on just about everything in the painting, and then I build on that. I'll put more values, until I get to the darks and the details in the very end. But I wanted to get this section done because this is the glass section. Then we have the pearl section, and then we'll have the very reflective section, okay? So that's sort of my plan for how I would work this. But that's a great question, because I have seen people that typically work and they'll complete like somebody's eye, and then they start growing out from the eye on a portrait, right? And it's like, well, how are you doing that in watercolor, you know? To me, that's like mystery. I don't know how they're doing it. I've found ways that work for me, and just always remember that when you see an instructor or somebody giving you some instruction, just remember that they're giving you what works for them, not necessarily what works for everybody. And there is no law book or rule book on painting, so we're all different, which is a good thing. I'm always open to seeing how differently people work. I still take lots of classes myself. But I would say that my painting has improved more in the last 10 years than I did in the previous 40, right? I've made far more leaps in the last 10 years because of the focus, the concentration. So, I mean, it's just proof. If you want to learn or get better faster, you have to paint more. Just paint more often and stay focused on it. Don't flip-flop different papers, different mediums, different hobbies, all of those sorts of things. If you want to get better, you just stay focused, which is almost becoming a lost art. Focus is, I think internet and social media is really destroying a lot of people's focus. I sometimes will do my videos and somebody will make a remark, too much chit-chat, because they don't have time. They're in a hurry. They want to get right down to the meat of it. And they'll often say, like, too much chit-chat. Maybe you're thinking that now, I don't know, but hopefully not.
Shelley, you should say that Shelley put, if you wish, there are 4 CDs of work text over there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, during COVID, actually, I guess it was 2 years ago now, I flew down to Austin, Texas, and on Eric Rhodes' invite, and I produced a couple of videos. And I was one of the faculty for Watercolor Live. If you're not familiar with Watercolor Live, anybody here know it? Yep. Watercolor Live? Okay, so yeah, I was one of the faculty, not this year, but last year. I was on the faculty for Watercolor Live, and that was one of the videos that I recorded while I was down in Austin. I'm switching now to a little bit of blue in this brown, just to change it up a little bit. I'm going to go with some cerulean, maybe even a little bit of cobalt mixed in here to get some of that blue in there. It's a combination of blue and brown. So this is going to come down to this first little lip and stop. All right, I won't continue this down into the rest of it until I get the pearl on there. All right, but this is for the most part pretty complete at this stage. Sure, I could fine tune it, and if I were on my own, I would. I would probably spend a lot of time fine tuning it, but the basics are there. I can come back and revisit some of this, I can adjust things, and I will come back to show you how I'll lighten up that one bit of flare there. I'm just adding a little pink before I quit on this.
Are you working without a drawing?
No, I have a drawing. It's just very, very lightly transferred. Yeah. So, no, geez, I would be good, wouldn't I? All right. So, in this pearl area, we have a lot of different colors. We've got a bright yellow. We've got a bright pink. I even see bits of green in here. It is like a rainbow of stuff going on. But there's lights and there's darks. So I'm going to keep that in mind as I'm doing this. There are bright colors, there are muted colors, but the one thing that's common with all of this is that it's all soft and like all these edges are soft. So I'm going to take one section at a time. I'm going to take this left side because I'm right-handed. I start on the left side. If you're left-handed, you'd start probably on the right side. And I'm applying some clean water here. Now, these pencil lines are probably a little too light for you to see. Maybe I can darken some up while this dries, but I'll do this section and I'll darken them up so you can see.
People can see it at the break.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Mike, would you let me know an appropriate time?
Sure.
Like about the halfway mark?
10 minutes.
About 10 more minutes?
Yeah, and then we'll take a break.
Yeah, that'd be good. Okay. They'll give me enough time to put some of this in here.
Okay.
So I'm going to use some of that raw sienna again, because I definitely see that. But I also see some, maybe some brighter yellow, like a gamboge or like a gamboge. It's good color there. And I should mention, before I start painting, I always wet all of my color. These are tube paints. I pour them in, fill them up, and before I sit at each session, I soften all my paints, and then I wait. I wait for, 10 minutes or so, until that water penetrates right down to the bottom. I didn't bring any palette knives, but I could take my palette knife and scoop all of that color out of there now, because that's softened up the paint all the way to the bottom of the well. If you go spray, 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 that's only softening the top, because that's evaporating right away. If the water has to sit there, it goes into the paint and softens the whole thing. So if I have a big area that I want to get dark, that's how I'll do it. Get the paint gooey to get the rich color. So I'm getting some, pardon me?
You don't spray it, what do you do with it?
No, I don't spray it. I use a eyedropper, a pipette, and I put a generous amount in. Like, you'd be surprised how much I'm actually putting in. I almost drown it, but not quite. Like, I would put, let's say, half a teaspoon of water in each of these wells. A lot of people, I will tell you right now, a lot of people ask me about this palette. It unfortunately has been discontinued. It's a Speedball watercolor, or color wheel watercolor palette. You can't get this one anymore, but it's very similar to the Stephen Quiller palette, in case you're interested. I know a lot of people always ask me about that. So I want to re-wet this because I think it's probably dried with all that chatting. I want to work on damp surface, not wet surface, because I want the paint to stay where I'm putting it. Okay, so I'm going to start with my bright colors first. That usually keeps them fresher. So I start with my bright colors first, and I see yellow in this spot. Then I rinse my brush and I go into my red. I have to rinse my brush. If I don't do that, I'm going to get orange. So I have to rinse my brush, and I'm going to go into some bright pink here, which looks far too bright at the moment, but hang in there. It'll get toned down. It's always easy to tone down a color, but you can't bring it back again. Once that brightness is gone, it's gone. There's no recovering from that.
Is that permanent rose?
It is permanent rose, yes. I find I use permanent rose a lot. Now, I do like that Payne's Gray burnt sienna mixture. And there's other ways that I could get a dark brown like that. The burnt sienna can be a little bit granulating, and maybe I don't want granulation too much in this, but for convenience sake, I'm going to use burnt sienna. So I will come in here. Oh, that's going to spread too far. So my brush is too wet. I can see how that's just ballooning out. So let's get that under control. I think before I do that, I'm going to put more of that peachy color down. So some of that peachy color goes here and here. In fact, I could put it everywhere because the darks can go on top. Okay, so there's that peachy color. Now I'll take that, a little bit of green. I can mix a little green here. Cobalt blue, little gamboge, and just a little bit of this in here. It's going to give me some green. I'm just looking for the placement of it, and it's all going on this damp surface. The thing to remember about working on a damp surface is how wet your brush is. I blot it so that it takes some of the extra moisture out of the belly of the brush. There's still paint on there, as you can see. And yes, it's going to be too light. I'll probably have to do this twice in order to get this as dark as I want. That's the nature of when you're working on a wet surface, everything turns out brighter, lighter than you want. So you can try exaggerating your color a little bit, or your value a little bit, which I'll try and do. I'm blotting this part of the brush, not the tip. That's where the color is. So I'm blotting that. Now we'll see if I can get this a little stronger. See, that's a little better. But here's what you have to watch. When the paint starts to not give you the softness, it's talking to you. It's telling you to stop. You have to listen. You can't just say, "Oh, I just got a little bit more to do." Oh, that's tripped me up so many times. It's like, I just want to get it done, and I try, and I fail every time. See, I'm starting to get a little bit of a hard line there. So, blot my brush, soften what I can. I think it's still a little wet here, so I'm going to try a bit, but if it doesn't work, I really will stop and get out of here. Not as soft as I would like. Look at that kind of hard line that I've got there, right? Not ideal. So when I'm softening an edge, I blot my brush, it's clean, and I hit the edge of it like that. But always lay the brush in the clean spot, not on the paint. I see so many people try to soften an edge by doing this, pulling the dark out a little bit more. Doesn't work. You have to lay your brush in the clean spot. Okay, I have to get out of there. It's not giving me the opportunity anymore to work there.
This may be a good time to take a break.
Would be, yes.
You want to keep, if you want to keep painting, whatever you want to do.
Well, I might do,
People will probably come up with a show.
okay. Yeah, if you want to grab your coffee or water and gather round, that would be fine by me. I'm going to wet the next section. Sure. There's a picture of my palette on my website too. There's a materials page. Thank you. Yeah, so. And it's all labeled so you can see what the colors are. Yes.
I signed this one whenever, but I need your signature in my files for there. It's the same thing, Josh. Accepted the
Yeah, so this is what they school is always past 2 years. No, it's
It's phenomenal. So clear, so beautiful. It really works. Hi, Shelley.
Hi.
I'm Sue Dewey, I'm the treasurer.
Hi.
I have a check for you.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I just want you to put it somewhere safe that you know where it is.
All right, I'll just put
And
that.
you know we went up, it's $300.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I said, this is ridiculous. So that's for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, my dear.
You're
This
so
is
welcome.
delightful. Just
good.
delightful.
Oh, do you? Oh, thank you. You are Mary. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
You know, like how well you explain everything.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Right, she said to me she could send me this stuff this week. Just got somebody today, I think, seen it, and she said she would.
It's losing its shine, so I'm going to come back to that. If I get a little color everywhere, people won't mind the not being able to see the pencil lines, right?
Very inspiring, beautiful.
Thank you. Actually, I'll do this part.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
I was curious between opaque and transparent and mixing them. You know,
Oh, yes?
What the effect,
The-
or what you should do and should not do when you
There's
use
no
tra-
problem mixing them. It just depends on what you're planning to do. If you're going to glaze over, like so I want to put, say, a layer on this, I wouldn't use opaque. Opaque is great as a first layer, not so great as a top layer, unless your intention is to cover. But even opaque color doesn't cover really well. Like if you're trying to put a bright, like a cadmium orange over a blue, your orange is going to turn kind of brown. It won't be as nice. It won't be see-through, like you won't see as much of the blue coming through, but it will affect that orange.
Okay, all right.
So it's good as a first layer, not so good as second layer.
So opaque, first layer, okay,
Yeah,
not first transparent.
yes, that would be my advice,
Okay.
but
I just wondered if, mixing like a cad yellow.
they can mix fine. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, and then you might make it into a semi-transparent, but in that process, right?
Hi, Sue.
Hi, how are you doing?
Where are your pictures that you did like up north?
I'll be back.
Like the lakes and the woods, and, whereabouts in Canada?
Oh, Algonquin area mostly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right in Algonquin or south of Algonquin? Because we own
Different
property
places.
up in the Kawartha Highlands. Do you know where they are?
I'm going there tomorrow.
You're kidding,
I
where?
am not. I'm going to Sandy Lane Cottages.
Oh, wow. And what lake is it on, do you know?
Is that me vibrating? I think it. Oh, I think
No,
it.
it's me. I got a call coming in, but
I think it was me too.
we're both vibrating.
Yeah. Let's see. I can show it to you.
Because ours is on Mississauga Lake, our island that we own. My grandparents bought it in 1946. So we've been up there for 70 plus
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. I got to leave 6 o'clock tomorrow
Wow.
to go to Sandy Lane Resort.
Yeah. Huh?
Okay. It's on Halls Lake.
Halls? Okay. Oh, so you're even a little bit more north of us. Let's see. Oh yeah, Halliburton. You're not north of us. You're west of us. Halliburton is like to the. Let me see.
Yeah. Well, it's.
We're north of Buckhorn. North of.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're to the west of us. North of Peterborough. Yeah. See, our lakes, we're in the Kawartha Highland Provincial
Oh,
Park
yeah?
right
Okay.
there.
Yes.
And this is our lake.
Oh.
And that's actually our island right there.
Oh.
Weird.
Small world.
Because it looks familiar to me. When I go up in the summertime, there's a group that gets together and paints and does stuff over at the community center.
Yeah.
So I go and join them a couple times a year. And
Well,
Yeah.
so much of northern Ontario looks that
it's very
way.
the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it
it's
does.
beautiful.
And I knew it was in northern Ontario, but
Yes.
I just wanted
It's
to-
beautiful.
Yeah.
Would you do me a favor and check the battery life on your train?
Oh, yes, you told.
At a moment.
Yeah. Here, I'll let you try it.
I'm gonna switch batteries.
Okay.
Just,
Be right back.
Oh, okay. Set it over there for him.
last year.
I sprained my thumb the other day, like night before last, and I thought, oh no. I know.
Good for you.
Yeah, it's kind of black and blue, but
Yeah.
I can hold a brush. I just can't open a jar or
Oh, yeah.
turn a doorknob and
Yeah,
things like
yeah.
that. So you can talk to me there.
Oh,
Yes.
that's fine.
Wonderful, thank you.
That's amazing.
Maybe I'll just leave that over here.
So I'm not as realistic as you are.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like to see what I get when I play with watercolor. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
I'm a little looser than you are.
Most people are.
And I don't, yeah, you are, you're very exact. But you have such a good command. I mean, I like, you know,
Thank you.
really good.
Oh, $80.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I think if you go to Streamline, they're like 120.
Okay.
So.
How you doing there, lady?
I'm doing fine. Yeah. Ready to start when you are. If you want to call the, I don't know, was that 10 minutes? I have no idea. Yeah. Okay.
If they have a bell or a whistle, you can see how effective that was. You can just start talking, they'll come back.
Okay. I will start continuing in a moment. If you want to settle in. So you can see that I've blocked in a few areas. I didn't get very far in this bigger middle section before it started to dry, so I had to let it dry. But it's dry enough now. I'll make sure just with my dryer.
kind of tool is that, did you say?
It's a heated craft tool. It's a heat tool.
Oh.
Yeah. It's very fast and it's very quiet. As much as I love that tool for drying things, you do have to wait for your paper to cool down before you paint on it, because if you paint on paper that's still warm from the dryer, it will just soak up or evaporate that water so quickly. So I'm just going to let that get back to room temperature, and then I can re-wet and continue on. And like I said, you can see I did not get very far in this section here. I got my bright colors mostly where they need to be. But I'm going to re-wet it all again. I don't have to really be that careful around here because this section here is really dark. It's more this little neck, where it comes up towards the neck. That area has those bright, colorful things in there, which are quite different from what's around it. So that's really more the area that I have to avoid. This area down here, I don't have to be quite so fussy, but I have to make sure I don't miss any places here. Now, I always stretch my paper. I didn't talk about this, but I always stretch my paper. I much prefer the sheets, which if there's any left, I might take 2, if anybody's listening. But I might take 2 of those sheets. But I like the sheets. I can cut them down to any size that I want. And but there's something different about the sheets. The texture on the sheets is different than the pads or blocks. Has anybody else found that? Yes. Yeah, there's a different texture, and I suppose it's part of the manufacturing process, but it is different, and it's a noticeable difference. I find that the blocks and the sheets or the pads have a little bit more of a waffle pattern, whereas the individual sheets are just more random texture, which I prefer. All right, so I'm gonna get a little stronger here because I want to step up the pace. Now I have a ghost version. I can go ahead and get a little braver and build up the colors some more. So I'll do that. This is coming in here with this peachy color. Now there's a really light area right through here. So I don't want to put too much more color right in that spot there. That's kind of a key area that tells me that there's sort of a glass ball inside of the clear ball, and which you often see in these perfume bottles. When I started painting glass and perfume bottles, I'm sorry, if you like it, welcome to your new addiction. Because you will have a collection, all your friends will give you glass and glass pieces, and before you know it, you have to build multiple shelves in your studio just to house the glass that you own.
Now, when you said a glass ball, did you mean literally a glass ball inside, or not?
The reservoir for, pardon me, the reservoir for the perfume. I'm going to paint till that calms down. Made myself cry.
This is a very interesting subject, but is this particularly difficult for you, this, more than another one, another painting?
Typical, yeah. I don't know that I have a typical. I paint.
Difficult, is this more difficult?
No.
Okay.
I paint a lot of different subjects, and they each one challenges me, just like I said in my statement. I don't want to get too comfortable with something. So I'm looking for the next challenge. Pardon me. Nothing like. So I'm coming into some of my darks now, but I have to make sure that this is blotted. Not dark enough. I'm working in wet. And I'm looking for that shape that it's making in this glass, whatever this reflecting is here.
Totally clear.
Is the original which?
The original base, was that whole thing clear other than
No.
the surface? So
No, it had some color actually mixed into the glass, so it wasn't absolutely clear. This is not reflection, it's actually part of the glass design. Now, I'm just blotting my brush a little bit and picking up some lighter color here to shape this a little bit more. And I'm really using a light touch here. It's a little green, a little bit greenish up here, but I don't think that that's wet enough anymore. So I'm going to move somewhere else. I'll come back to this. And it's a little blotchy. It's not quite as smooth as I want. That's going to happen to you probably as much as it happens to me. Yeah. So what I'll do is I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to just come up here and re-wet this section and keep building there. So I just keep jumping around, but it's all the same kind of section, like the same type of technique.
When you say wetting, you're only putting enough on to get to kind of a satin, not a glossy.
Right. I don't have to get it as wet as I did the first time. All right, back to that peachy color, which I was a little bit shy about when I first did it, but I'm going to get a little bolder now. Get that peachy color in there. Gets a little bit green just below that. Take some mix up a bit of green, but not too wet. I blot my brush on the belly part of the brush, and I want to get this greenish color in here. I need to mix a little more than that. Even as wet as I got that, it's still a little bit dry. I think this hull is very dry. I'm going to pull some of that value out. I can see it's not going to be light enough, so I just lift a little out. It's a little push-pull that I'm doing here just to get the values right and the placement. And I'm going to go a little darker. Starting to dry. I can, you know, you can tell in an instant when you start to touch your paper that it's getting too dry. You can tell immediately. If you can't feel it with your brush, you can see it getting a hard line. So that means stop again. That's why I usually jump around in my paintings, and I'm always, going from one subject to another. But this one, fortunately, has sections that have similar qualities, and I can keep going with the same colors and everything else. So that, in that sense, it makes it kind of convenient. I'm going to come over to this little sliver on the right-hand side. I put some color in there, but it's a little weak. I tend to get to my paintings inch by inch. I'm a very patient painter. I hear that all the time. You're so patient. Yeah, I am. And it's just who I am. I could spend hours just getting lost in this. I do some of my best thinking when I'm painting. And I personally love the challenge of realism. I think, I don't know, maybe you'll disagree with me, but I think realism is one of the most challenging or difficult ways to approach watercolor. It's almost like watercolor wasn't really intended for high realism. And it just makes me want to say, hold my beer. Let me show you. Because I just like how challenging it is.
Have you ever heard of Steve Hanks?
Oh, yes.
Okay, yeah, he's a realistic.
Yes, yes. He was amazing. There, if you like, I don't know how many are realists here. Realistic, a couple of timid hands, and yeah, okay. So a lot of you will paint realistically. So this is maybe this is more along your line, but the one thing I have found about painting a lot is you get a lot of inventory. So I'm in no hurry to finish another painting. I am always, but because I teach so many classes, I end up with a lot of paintings. Okay, so is this area dry enough? Not quite. I will speed it up a little bit.
When you teach your classes, do you paint-alongs where they're painting the same as you are?
When I'm doing it online, that's always how I do it. Because I can't see and instruct you independently if I'm online. In person, sometimes people will paint along exactly what I'm doing, but other people, especially some of my more intermediate or advanced students, will be happy to pick something similar along the lines of what I'm teaching, and they'll paint their own. And I encourage it, right? Because that tells me that you're thinking through the process yourself, because now I'm not telling you. There was one instructor that kind of referred it referred to it as disco classes. Disco here, disco there. And it was a great way to describe it because basically it's a step by step. And while that's good, because it does teach you the thinking process, all the steps that I'm thinking as I'm going through, but it may not necessarily, until you've done some of those, you are not going to work independently in the same way. So yeah, I'm working with mostly the same, everybody painting the same. You'll see from my website that I have a lot of Zoom workshops. I have about 150 Zoom workshops as well. So I have the free ones, and then I have the longer Zoom workshops, right, where it's a little more like start to finish and all in real time, and some of the videos are like up to 5 hours. So, it's not a one and done kind of thing where it's just slapped together. It's 5 hours of instruction, and you can ask questions. If you're in the live, you can ask questions. Most of them are recorded now, but so you can't ask as it's going along, but you can send me an email and ask your questions. I'm happy to answer questions about any of the workshops I've offered. I'm wetting this section again, and I'm going to continue building up. I want to get a little bit more of that green color.
I think I see 2 wells with actual green right out of the tube. What two greens do you have?
I have Hooker's Green Dark, and I have Sap Green. And honestly, I hardly ever use them. I think I put them on, this is a color wheel palette. I felt like it just needed some green, but I'm actually not using it that much, to be quite honest. I usually mix my own because I get more variety and more interesting greens that way. If you get green out of a tube, you get one color. If you mix your greens, you get all kinds of colors. So I'm going to put a little bit of this greenish gold. Let's make a little bit of raw sienna in there so it's a little bit more of a green gold. Blot my brush because this paper is going to start to dry, and I need to make sure that as I'm painting this in here, that I'm not going to make blossoms and stuff. So I have to make sure that my brush is drier than the paper. I usually will tell people, if you have trouble figuring it out, a dry brush goes on wet paper, a wet brush goes on dry paper. So they're flipped. One or the other has to be wet. The exception, of course, is if you're doing a big graded wash or something like that, then everything's wet. But if you're trying to paint as I'm painting here and you want a little bit of control, that's what you can do. Just remember that little expression. I'm going to make sure this stays wet up here a little bit longer because it is drying in here very, very quickly. Switch to a larger brush, perhaps. My hand makes shadows. Blotting the belly part. All right, so this is going to go in a lot more melted color, if you will. And I can go ahead and start building up some darks because these darks are what's going to make this very yummy. Right? Getting the darks in there is like my favorite part.
mostly round brushes?
Mostly. Well, it depends on what I'm painting. If I'm painting architecture of any kind, I like a flat brush for that because it has a built-in straight edge and it has a built-in corner. So I like it for that. A lot of the flat brushes are skinny. If you look at it sideways, they're skinny, so they don't hold a lot unless it's designed as a wash brush, which is a little bit fatter belly. It holds more paint and water. But just trying to get a little bit of variation in this. I want to make it a little bit, maybe a little bit more green. So I'm adding little bits of yellow in here. Build, build, build. And if you can work quickly, that's good, but you still have to work carefully, which is very inconvenient, but it's what's required. Bringing some of those green and gold tones in there. Slowly building. And I'm going to leave that for a bit. I don't want to press my luck and start to mess up some of the washes that I put in there. So I'll jump down to here, to the base. Now this base is very interesting because it's got, it's almost a marbly type of application with the colored glass in this base here. I've already put a little bit of that peachy color, obviously more pink at the bottom. But I'm going to re-wet this area. Thank you, thank you. I used to teach at a senior center next to the tap dancers.
I was thinking that was your challenge tonight, to dance while you're painting.
There you go. I can chair dance, maybe. All right, so I don't think I really need to make this a lot darker other than to add in those markings. So these markings to me look like a dirty pink. So I'm going to take my permanent rose, and why don't I add some of this dirty mixture that I've been using up here, add a little bit of that into it. And that will give me a dirtier pink. Let's test this out. Well, I don't think that's wet enough, is it? Either that or I missed a spot. So let's get this wet again. It is really dry in here. It's drying really a lot faster than I'm used to.
I think the lights also make it.
Yeah.
Could be, although they're not generating a lot of heat, but it is drying really, really fast on me.
The radiators are on.
It's dry heat in a lot of these older buildings because they don't have like a furnace and vents, right? So they can't put humidifiers in the system. Right, maybe I'll use that smaller brush. Yeah, that's going to be a lot better. And a lot of this is kind of squiggly, so that what I'm going to do is squiggles. I don't have to make it exactly the same. I'm just trying to get the right impression of what is going on here. That's still too bright, so let's muddy that up a little bit more. Looking to see, if it's swirling up in that direction, I don't have to make it the same, but I want to get the same effect. So I need to also bring a swirl up into that section. Not a lot of pink up there, so I don't take too much pink up into there, but even a little darker in some of these places. So down in here, I might just come in and add some more dark right in here. It's really dark along this right edge. So I'll go into my dark color here. I didn't wet this, so I'll have to soften this edge. But you can see I can add in something really dark there. And then rinse my brush. Don't forget that blot. And I'm going to come this way. Instead of pulling that out, I'm going to come in towards it and soften it that way. Always come towards your color when you're trying to soften your edge. Don't pull away from it. Got to keep going with some of this deeper pink. Down in here, dabble. So just kind of a lot of that. Oh, that's starting to dry in there. Look at that hard line just hit there. So I'll rinse my brush. Just come down in here one more time with clean water, and then I will put a few more bits with the red. I wet that and it dried absolutely instantly. Like gone. I'm not staying wet for you. Okay, so I'm starting to get the feel of that swirling pattern. I just need to add some more darks in here. Well, maybe not that dark. If you put something down and it's too dark, just spread it out. Just do it right away. Very often, the success to painting is learning how to react when something goes wrong. If you learn what to do and you react quickly, you can often resolve whatever the problem is. Like if you put down too much color and you're quick about it with a damp brush, blotted, you can pull up color. If you don't put enough down, you can add water, like put a damp brush down and help blend that out or soften it.
I thought you were talking about temperament.
Yeah. Well, I guess I am. Not panicking is a good thing to do. And that's giving me some hard lines, so I'm reacting to this, and I'm trying to keep my hand out of my shadow out of this light here, and I will just soften that a little bit. And then I don't have a problem to deal with later. I just react to it right away. I'll build in smaller increments because it allows me to make those corrections. And if I have a ghost version down first, and I see, I'm kind of putting those darks in the wrong place. They're not so dark that, it's irrecoverable. I can usually lift some of that out, so I can shift things. So I'm going to build this up. I'm just going to do one more quick. How are we doing for time?
We've got 15 minutes.
15, okay. I will dry this, and I'm going to put these other things on though. But I would put another layer on those and get those a little darker. If I get time, I'll still do that. But I want to get this dry. And I have a little tool that I use very often. I especially recommend it to students, and that is to determine whether or not your values are accurate. You can take a little piece of cardboard. Now, this is just an ordinary piece of cardboard, recycled, and it's got a little hole in the middle. And I can check, and I know I'm too light, if I check that spot and that spot, I can tell immediately. And the reason that this works so well is it isolates all the distractions from around that little color. And then I'll know, oh, that's, and this tells you in a moment. So, you know, when you're painting and you say, what do you think? Is that too dark? You don't have to ask anybody. You can just take this out and you'll put it on and you'll know if it's dark enough. Right? So I'm closer down here. I got a little bit braver down there. It also wasn't as big an area, so I didn't have to worry about it drying so much. This is cooled down. So I'm going to start up in here. And I think I'm just going to, because it's drying so quickly in here, I'm just going to wet ahead of where I'm painting because it's just drying like crazy fast in here. And I'm going to start with this yellow. And I know that it's dark at the top, but I don't want to start with the dark because that'll be the end of my nice bright yellow. So I will start with my yellow. And these colors are more vivid. This is shinier. I don't have to blend quite so much. I'm going to take some cerulean blue. And work around that. It's turning a little green because it's mixing a little bit with the yellow, but I'm going to put down some stronger color. Then I'll go to the cobalt blue, which is a nice vibrant blue. And I want to go straight to like pure colors, like colors straight out of the tube to do this, because that's what's going to give me the vibrancy. Now I'm not overlapping these too much, just enough so that they don't have hard lines, right? Just enough that they just kiss and melt together. So let's go here. Actually, I have a phthalo. A phthalo would probably be even more vivid here. It's staining, which is okay, but it's even more vivid than the cobalt blue. But if I use cobalt blue pretty intensely, I'll be able to get this pretty lively. Now I'm in a dry spot, so here I'm going to wet ahead and catch that edge, and now I don't have a hard line. Try to shape this nicely. And then I'm back to more of the cerulean. There's a little bit of sort of turquoisey color in there. In fact, I think what I'll do, instead of putting cerulean in there, I could actually use a little bit of yellow maybe. And that will alter that, make that a little bit more greenish automatically. I'm going to use a cool yellow because I'm working on a blue. I'm going to use this cool yellow so it doesn't get muddy. And that's already drying, wow. But now we're starting to merge into this really dark. So I'm going to take my cobalt blue and I'm going to put lots of Payne's gray with it. Cobalt blue, Payne's gray will give me a really nice deep blue. All right, I don't want this to start with a hard edge, so I'm just going to run this brush down here. starting with the yellow and coming down. And I'm going to start putting this extra dark in here. Now this I'm working on dry because this part here I want extra dark. So I'm working on dry, but I've got a wet brush, because now I'm working on dry. I've had to switch from a dry brush on wet paper. I'm now switching to a wet brush on dry paper. All those things I didn't even know I didn't know in college when I was struggling so hard. These are things I didn't know. And I said when I first started teaching that if I teach, I'm going to teach in a way that the mechanics are obvious, like that you know what to do to get the result you want. There's nothing more frustrating than fumbling through your painting and trying to figure out the techniques as well as your idea. All right, getting in here nice rich color. That Payne's mixed with that blue is so luscious. These darks are really good. And they really make the highlights shine.
So what you said about the cool yellow over, it wouldn't make mud.
Right.
So if you did a warm yellow.
It's not that it would make mud, but it wouldn't make as clean or bright a greenish yellow. It would be more olive, correct.
What cool yellow do you like?
I'm using Aureolin. Now in Da Vinci, that's a hue. And I was explaining what hues mean to my class the other night, my beginner class. A lot of companies will make a hue, and there's this misconception that a hue is inferior. It's not. Many times they make a hue or a substitute for the original color because the original color is toxic. They might do it because the original color is ridiculously hard to get, and therefore it's priced way beyond anybody's budget. Then you're afraid to use it. Do you have nice colors that you're afraid to use? Like, how ridiculous is that, right? I've got some. It's like, oh, I like that. I'm going to save it. Like, for what? That's kind of silly. But I am loading up this wet brush to get this really rich color here. And I'm going to get around to about here, and I'll need to start transitioning again. So I need to start getting into my cobalt blue. I'm going to keep that edge wet while I get my cobalt blue ready. It's actually not quite cobalt. It's a little bit, maybe a little bit of cobalt and cerulean mixed together, or even a little yellow in it. Just enough. It's a little more green blue than the cobalt by itself. So here we go. Now I touched that to keep it going, but now I'm going to rinse my brush because I don't want to start dragging that dark color all the way up. I want to keep the color clean now.
I am assuming that you are not going to be 100% finished with this.
Oh, I'm never finished. When describe finished. I'm never finished. I'm always going to find one more thing to do.
I know Carol Syracuse would be very happy when you are finished. You send us a JPEG of it to share with the membership.
Of course. I can even leave you the painting if you want.
No, it's got to be done. No,
Oh, it's got to be done. Okay. Oh, when I'm done. Okay. All right. Of course. All right, so we're coming up into here with nice wet color, and it starts to change again, and it's changing not quite as dark, but it's a little more red and pink. So we've got a transition here. I'm going to come down into here. I'll soften this edge. See, I'm in a fork in the road right here. So do I go up or do I go down? Because it's all connected. So here's the dilemma. I'm going to start with clean water right here, and I'm going to soften this edge. Because if I soften that edge, I can continue it. Right, now I can go and finish this part down here. I can come back to that and blend it in by softening. So that's what I'm going to do. Yay! I like listening.
Yogi Berra said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it.
Yes, exactly. But I find when you're painting around something complicated, like, I don't know, flower petals or something like that, it's like, oh no, I've got to go this direction and that direction. And how do you handle it? So my reaction is to soften that edge so I can go in one direction and then revisit that. But if I stop and make a hard edge, that's there for good. I won't be able to recover from that. So now this is nice wet color I'm using here. And it suddenly changes to like a brown. So I'm going to go to burnt sienna here, darken it maybe with a little blue because that will make it more brown, and finish this here. It's actually got to be darker than that. Maybe I'll put some Payne's gray into it. You want to give me like a 10-minute warning before I get the hook?
10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay.
You're over.
I'm over?
Yeah, it's after 9.
Oh, no. Okay, sorry. You mean 10 minutes ago? Oh. Okay. All right, I will finish this little bit here. That's it, we're done. No, we will finish. So I'm going to take my bright yellow again, up in this top part here. And then it turns into a green, so I'll use cerulean. And then quickly into my cobalt. That cobalt I just put down is a little too dark. I can see that value is actually much lighter over here. So I'm just going to take my damp brush and blend that out. Then suddenly it's pink. So over to my permanent rose. And it's really light pink. So it's going to be thinned down. And it starts to blend into that blue. Okay, so let's get back to this blue here, and I'll put that in there. That connected pretty well. And I'm going to blot my brush and just soften it right into that color. And now you don't really see where I connected that. Right? I could soften this a little more. Actually, it's not that, it's a little bit soft now. Put that in there. So I was able to do this really bizarre shape, and keep it all connected, one color flowing into another, even in small sections. And when you get to a part where it splits, you can soften that edge. So you get the idea of this. I could certainly come in and get darker there, but I would do it the same way. I would wet it and apply that and get that darker. But essentially that is how I'm getting my iridescence. This area's got to be worked all wet in wet. No hard lines in there at all. So,
Well, thank you very much.
you're very welcome.